G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome aboard the Sea Venom FAW.20. The FAW.20 was the first production aircraft built on the NF-20 prototype design for the Sea Venom. It's powered by a 21.6 kilonewton or 4,850 foot-pound of thrust Ghost 103 turbojet engine. Now of course this aircraft was operated by the Royal Navy, but it was also operated by both the French and the Royal Australian Navy. The Sea Venoms flew off the aircraft carrier Melbourne back in the days when we actually had an aircraft carrier and were our replacements for the Sea Fury fighters. They served well and successfully for a number of years until eventually old age caught up with them, and they were withdrawn from frontline service in 1967, although they did stay in flying format and continue operating as training aircraft well into the 1970s. The Sea Venom is essentially a modified and up-powered version of the standard two-seat Venom Night Fighter variant. However, it did receive a couple of modifications due to its new naval role. For starters, the wings are now capable of folding. The lip above the exhaust on the aircraft is actually the place where the tail hook for carrier landings has been fitted. The landing gear and parts of the fuselage were also modified. The landing gear itself was lengthened to allow for a larger ground clearance for takeoff and landings from a carrier, and the landing gear itself, as well as fuselage and all the mounting points, was strengthened due to the high impact that tends to occur during carrier landings. But the most interesting feature that this aircraft was given when it was navalised into the Sea Venom was a modified cockpit. The cockpit itself is actually capable of ejecting the pilot safely if the aircraft has made a water landing and actually submerged. It can eject the pilots from underwater. Now, while these days this feature is pretty common amongst all naval and carrier operating fighters, however, at the time the Sea Venom was one of very few that had this capability. Now, the Sea Venom is a two-seat aircraft. The primary seat is the pilot who flies the plane, obviously. The second seat, which is manned by somebody who is claiming to be Nigel, but I'm not entirely sure he is. He mans the second seat. His primary roles are radar operation, radio communications, and navigation. Now, while the FAW-20s were a production aircraft, they would be best described as a limited production. Only around 50 of these aircraft were actually produced. The primary production run for the Sea Venom was actually the FAW-21s, of which around 170 aircraft were built. In War Thunder, this aircraft comes in at rank 5, battle rating 9, which makes it one of the two top tier British aircraft, or British jet aircraft, in Era 5. It's armed with 4 20mm Hispano Mark 5 cannons with 600 rounds of ammunition, and with upgrades has a maximum listed speed of just under 1,000 km an hour at 10,000 feet, optimal altitude, a turn time of around 25 seconds with a rate of climb of around about 5,300 feet per minute. Okay, history lesson and basic statistics over. How the hell does this thing fly? Well, you know what, I actually kind of like it. So to be clear, the plane has a host of problems, and they're exactly the same problems that almost all British aircraft have, especially when they're stock. The guns are kind of shitty because they have the stock ammunition belts, which are notoriously bad across the board. So your first upgrade should be trying to grind those things out so you can actually put some decent shells in your guns. The plane is incredibly slow to accelerate, especially off the runway. You'll notice it takes almost a third longer or a third more runway to actually get this thing up and off the ground as opposed to an F-86 Sabre. Now, this may not seem like something that would really concern you all that much until you take into account that this thing will spawn on carriers if you happen to get a Pacific map, unless you follow a very set sequence with a stock aircraft, and that is hold your brakes until you start rolling, deploy your landing flaps as you pass by the carrier control tower, and then as soon as you hit the end of the runway before you clear the carrier deck, press and hold your pitch up key as hard as you possibly can and hold it until you are in the air. You will go straight into the ocean. It will not lift off the carrier deck. It accelerates too slowly and it's too heavy. Incidentally, if you're unfortunate enough to spawn on a map that has a particularly short runway, exactly the same sequence will get you off the ground. Once you get it into the air, again, it's a big slug. It takes forever to wind out a decent speed. Even at low sea level, you will struggle to get this thing up to 600 to 700 kilometers an hour before you start running into enemy aircraft. I recommend turning away from them unless you get a particularly large map like Spain, and trying to climb your way out to your 10,000 foot optimal and gain airspeed there. However, and this is where things go around, it takes forever to get the thing wound up. but once you have it up to speed, it seems to hold its energy very well and generate its energy very well. Once you get this plane up to 900 kilometers an hour for the first time, getting it back there is incredibly easy, and while you will lose a lot of speed when you turn, it is very simple to gain it back very rapidly. This couples in rather nicely with the second thing I noticed with this aircraft, and you will notice it in here when I begin engaging this MiG-15. This aircraft doesn't suffer, or suffers very little, control stiffening regardless of speed. That is to say, you have the vast majority of your control range still available even at 900 kilometers an hour. Now, this is something to watch because you can break the wings on this aircraft, but that's the second thing about it. You've sort of got to go out of your way to do it. The wings will break off instantly if you throw it into a 12G turn. More than 3 to 4 seconds sustained 11Gs will also rip the wings off. However, from 11Gs down, so 10Gs and down, this plane won't break its wings. Turn as hard as you want, it doesn't care. Now, my first bursts towards this MiG-15 were rather poorly aimed. In my defense, this was the second time I had ever flown the Sea Venom out, and I was also shocked at how well this plane was able to just stick to the MiG. Once I got him this close at this speed, he couldn't get away. Try as hard as he might, I was right there and he was not getting away. Now, to be clear here, in the long run, if he had opened up the throttles, he would have been able to open a gap. However, the Sea Venom, even stock, is just fast enough that the MiG-15's rate of open would be small enough to give you all the time in the world you need to continually put shots into the back of the aircraft. And there's my first kill of the match. And at that sort of range and that sort of speed, the MiG can't outturn you. It suffers control stiffening well before you do in the Sea Venom. So it's locked up trying to make a high G turn, and you're just lazily following it through, continuing to put shots in it with no problems whatsoever. And the final thing is the MiG can't cause an overshoot because you have bigger air brakes. If he deploys his air brakes and pulls his throttle back and you do exactly the same thing, well, you will just sit like glue on his rear and there's nothing he can do about that. It's actually a very interesting aircraft. At first it appears to have all of the disadvantages. It's the slowest battle rating 9 aircraft in the game. It has the worst acceleration of all the battle rating 9 aircraft. It appears to be little more than a slightly faster, slightly larger Venom or Vampire, which you would think would be absolutely pathetic at battle rating 9. But surprisingly, it doesn't seem to be. Closing quickly on this MiG-15, it cuts in overhead, and you can see here, just sustain 7G turnover, just roll it through. I'm using a little bit of mouse here because I'm being very gentle. I don't want to put too much force on the wings. I wasn't entirely sure of the actual maximum limitations of the wings in this particular turn. And I put a strike in on him that cripples his wing, ruins his ability to fly, and at this point I just follow him through until I've got a nice position, pull the trigger, and there's my second kill of the match. I've had almost no problems getting kills in this aircraft from the point of this battle onwards, once I sort of come to terms with how this plane actually operates. It's not the fastest plane in the game, but it's fast enough that, as you can see, that second MiG, he tried to run as soon as he pulled into a tight engagement with me, and while he was opening a gap, he just wasn't opening a gap fast enough to outrun 20mm cannon rounds. And at this point it's the end of the match. The MiG-15 in front of me that I'm trying to pursue at the moment gets shot down, and by the time I turn around to head back towards the MiG-17 behind me, it has also been eliminated, and that's the end of the match. So in the end, this was a third place match with 2 kills, equal footing with first place, 67,000 Silver Lions and 10,842 research points on a premium account, no boosters or any other bonuses enabled. Which is a pretty reasonable round for my second time flying the Sea Venom into combat. So, my first impressions of this aircraft are that why it appears on paper to be the worst of the battle rating 9 aircraft, it is actually fairly competitive, providing you can get your enemy and force them into a close range engagement. Its sole weakness is really to high speed boom and zoomers. If you get MiG-15 or MiG-17 pilots that maintain their speed up around 900 or over and just continually hit you at high speed, you won't be able to engage them. You will lose too much speed trying to get into a position on them, and they will just pull away. They have vastly higher energy retention in vertical climb outs. They will boom back to altitude and you will not be able to get close to them. Having said that, you will have the maneuverability to almost endlessly dodge them. Unless you're being attacked by multiple 15s or 17s simultaneously, at that point you start running into an issue. But a single aircraft, you should, providing you're paying attention to your surroundings, be able to continually avoid high-speed booming attacks without ever actually taking a shot, due to your extreme level of maneuverability, even at high speed. I went into unlocking this aircraft and taking it out for its first flight, fully expecting to hate it. Fully expecting to think that this plane had nothing to offer. And I have been pleasantly surprised. It's by no means the best aircraft at Battle Rating 9, it's not even close. It is still probably the worst Battle Rating 9 aircraft, but it is competitive at Battle Rating 9, which is a hell of a lot more than what I expected it to be. And I do also have to admit that it is rather fun sticking in on the tail of a MiG-15 and watching him start to panic as he realizes that it doesn't matter how hard he throws his plane around, he cannot shake you. So anyways, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, if you want to check out more on the channel, hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already. And if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to give the like button a tap as well. Until next time, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.